Welcome back to the introductory video on AP World History. So if you recall from the last video, we were addressing this question about how is this course, AP World History, like a Rubik's Cube? And we said that in order to understand the immense amount of content in this course, you have to start breaking it down and organizing it. And so we said one way we can organize it is into the 6 time periods that the College Board organizes this course into. We can also start breaking it down and understanding the various geographic regions. In this video, we'll focus on the various themes that we can break the course down into. So AP World History is divided into 5 themes, and they follow the mnemonic device of SPICE. So S stands for social, the developments and transformation of social structures. P stands for political, state building, expansion, and conflict. I stands for human interaction with their environment. C, culture, so development and interaction of cultures. E stands for economic, so the creation, expansion, and interaction of economic systems. And so we will be breaking down and understanding these various terms and all of their complexities. So we'll start with social. Whenever we're describing the social characteristics, for example, of a society, we're really talking about their various social and economic classes. So the hierarchies of power and wealth. And usually we'll use a pyramid to display this, right? Because the people on top tend to be the smallest number of people, but they have the greatest amount of wealth and power. And then in descending hierarchy from there. And so we'll go extensively into who makes up these various socioeconomic classes in each society, and what are some of the similarities and differences between various societies and the hierarchies in which they have created. We'll talk about gender roles and relations, and the way in which patriarchy has shaped world history and impacted the role of women in society. We'll talk about family and kinship patterns and how societies have created various roles among family members. We'll talk about racial and ethnic constructions. So we are 99.9% biologically the same. That 1% of biological difference has been exploited and used by various people in order to create racial divisions among us. And so we'll talk about those various racial and ethnic constructions and the impact that has had in terms of the allocation of power. The P stands for political. So we'll focus on the formation of states, civilizations, empires, the various forms of government that they've chosen, monarchy being the most prevalent, but also increasingly democracy. We'll talk about nations and nationalism, the way in which states are unified through a common language, for example, or a common religion or a common culture. The term nationalism is oftentimes about the sense of pride you feel. Many people think this is an image from Nazi Germany, but in actuality, this is the way in which we used to pledge allegiance in the United States. Hitler made everything uncool. We'll talk about revolts and revolutions, right? The attempts to replace a government by the people, and the successful attempts, which are revolutions, the overthrow and replacement of the government by the people using force, a revolution. We'll talk about the formation in the 20th and 21st centuries of global organizations like the League of Nations and the United Nations. And so those international political bodies that have formed in order to address global issues. For interaction with the environment, we'll talk about migration patterns, so how human beings spread out initially across the various continents. We'll talk about geographic impact. So for example, the role that the allocation of various domesticated plants and animals had for the way in which societies and civilizations evolved on different continents. We'll talk about disease and demography. So demography means the study of human population. And so the connection between, for example, food and more people. So in order to sustain a larger population, you're always going to need new food supplies. We'll talk about the impact of the spread of diseases across trade networks, like the bubonic plague. When we talk about cultural themes, we're really focusing on religion and philosophies, so these various religious traditions and philosophical traditions.
We'll discuss how these traditions originated, how they spread, what are the major beliefs, and then how these traditions in many places mixed over time.
We'll focus on science and technology, so development of various technological innovations and how those innovations then impacted humans' ability to overcome various geographic obstacles within their world. We're talking about the development of art and architecture. So you have to be able to see various pieces of architecture like this Mayan temple here or this Greek Parthenon. For E, we'll talk about economic exchange. So we'll spend a lot of time talking about trade and commerce and the way in which goods are exchanged, within societies, intra-regional trade, but also inter-regional between societies. We'll talk about the role of agricultural and pastoral production. So with the formation of the Neolithic Revolution, the impact that those various economies had on societies. Pastoralists being a form of agriculture, but without domesticated plants, just focusing mostly on the domesticated animal side. We'll talk about labor systems, right? Nobody likes to do their own work. And so throughout time, societies have created systems of labor in order to produce work and oftentimes wealth for the concentrated people at the top. So the most common one in world history being slavery, but we'll talk about other forms of coerced labor. And then the impact the Industrial Revolution had in period 5, and the impact of industrialization, and how that has changed both the volume and spread of goods and technology. And then capitalism and socialism, these economic ideologies that emerged by both Adam Smith, the founder of capitalism, Karl Marx, the founder of socialism, communism. So that's the third way that we can really break down AP world history content, is into these various themes. So we have, again, our time periods, 6 time periods. We have our different geographic regions. We have our 5 spice themes. But you may be a master of all of this and still not be able to solve the Rubik's Cube, right? To be able to solve the problem. And so I know that I want to get all the blue ones on one side and organize all the yellow ones on another side. But ultimately, it requires some skills. And so one of the things that this course will help you do, hopefully, is to develop these 4 historical thinking skills. And these will be necessary for you to answer the 4 short answer questions on the AP test, the 1 long essay question, or the LEQ, on the test, and the DBQ, the document-based question, on the test. So what are these 4 historical thinking skills? First, you have to be able to analyze historical sources. So let's take, for example, this source. And again, this is not intended to be political at all, but we're just analyzing this from the perspective of a source. So this is a tweet by President Trump. It says, President Obama will go down as perhaps the worst president in the history of the United States. This was written on August 2nd, 2016, which is in the middle of the election. What do we know about President Trump in terms of maybe his gender, his age, his ethnicity, his political ideology, and how that may have contributed to what he wrote in this particular tweet? So who is the author is a critical question you need to answer whenever you're analyzing a source. What is its purpose? Why was this tweet created? Why does he choose to use Twitter as a platform and make statements such as this one? What is the purpose? Third, who is the intended audience here? Who are Donald J. Trump's Twitter followers? Who are these 60,000 people that like this and the 22,000 that retweeted this? Why does Trump say this particular thing given the audience that he knows he is delivering this message to? And then finally, what is the time period? We can see here that this tweet was on August 2nd, 2016. Now, what if I told you that that same day that President Obama gave an interview in which he said that Trump was unfit for the presidency? So this is when, again, he was running for the presidency. And so knowing the time period of the historical context is really important for explaining why certain people say the things that they choose to say. Now, if we can identify the author, the purpose, the audience, and the time period, each of those things may have some bearing upon the reliability of the document, its historical truth value. Is this statement historically true or accurate, given who the author is, what the purpose is, who the intended audience is, and what the time period is? All of those things can have some bearing upon the reliability of the document. And so that's what we do. We take these documents apart and analyze them. And so we'll be utilizing this historical thinking skill, especially when it comes to DBQs, because you're given the source of the document and then you have to explain why the content of the document can be understood in the context of what you know about that source. So comparison is another historical thinking skill. So it's analyzing the similarities and differences. And this is something that our brain does pretty intuitively. So, for example, what are the similarities and differences between students at City High and West High, right? These are the kinds of things that are, again, our brain does pretty intuitively. I think this is the easiest historical thinking skill. But what we have to do then is to take those same skills and apply them in a much more complex type of question. So, for example, analyze the similarities and differences between the role of the state in Japan's economic development and the role of the state in the economic development of one of the following during the late 19th and early 20th centuries: China, the Ottoman Empire, or Russia, right? When I first read that question, I oftentimes react very similar to my daughter.
Oh shoot. Oh shoot. Oh shoot. Oh shoot. Oh shoot. Oh shoot. Oh shoot.
Now, the one thing you can't do on the AP test is just sit there and spin your wheels and say, oh shoot, oh shoot, oh shoot. You have to have a game plan. And I guarantee you, if you take this course, you will have a game plan for breaking down comparative questions like this one, analyzing similarities and differences. Now, the next type of historical thinking skill that we need is the causation. So you need to be able to analyze causes and effects. So, for example, what caused you to take this course, AP World History, and not take World History for tomorrow? Was it the size of the textbook? Hopefully it's the opportunity to spend a little bit more time thinking critically about world history. And so hopefully that ultimately will be an effect. You'll walk away with a deeper understanding of our world today as a result of your immersion in all of this historical context. So we see, for example, a type of causation prompt. Analyze the causes and effects of the trans-Saharan trade on the cultural and political development of West Africa between 600 and 1450 CE. So you have to identify the causes and then think about the effects. So continuity and change over time, CCOT. This is probably the least intuitive and most difficult for students who are coming in contact with it for the first time. When you think about continuity, things that have stayed the same and then things that are changing over time. So what they'll do is they'll give you a time period and they'll give you a particular region and they'll say, all right, what has stayed the same? What has ultimately changed? And one example of this is using this video about gymnastics. So if you had to make a claim after watching that video about what stayed the same and what's changed in gymnastics from the 1960s to 2016, maybe hopefully one of the things you noticed that stayed the same is that events that they're participating in, right? They do the floor exercise and the pommel horse and the uneven bars and the balance beam. Another similarity may be the type of dress that women wear. One of the things that's changed, obviously, is the technical complexity of the different elements in gymnastics that these women are performing. The routines have become far more difficult and far more complex as time has passed. So you have to analyze both the changes and the things that remain the same over time in a CCOT question. So, for example, analyze the continuities and changes in nationalist ideology and practice in one of the following regions from the First World War to the present: the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa. So you see how that really combines all the different aspects of the Rubik's Cube, right? We have our spice theme, nationalism, so that's really political, state building. And then we have our time period, right? Period 6, World War I to the present. And then we have our geographic region, one of the three that you choose here. And so it's really your job then to manipulate that Rubik's Cube using your historical thinking skills in order to ensure that you're giving a complete and relevant and thoughtful answer to that question. So the big question after watching these two videos that you should be able to answer: how is this course WAP like a Rubik's Cube? So welcome. I'm looking forward to having you this year, and thanks for watching.